It's nice to be here, and nice to tell you something about life in the early Christian Salona. Today I'm going to speak about foreigners in late antique Salona. Salona was the largest city on the eastern Adriatic coast and the capital of the West Roman province of Dalmatia. Thanks to its location in the heart of the Roman Empire, it was well connected by sea with the Italian coast of the Adriatic, especially with Aquileia on its northern part. It was connected to the interior with Upper and Lower Pannonia and Upper Maesia by roads. At its peak during the 3rd century, the city had between 40 and 60,000 inhabitants. The connection was also strong with the eastern parts of Mediterranean. In the second epistle to Timothy, we read that St. Paul sent Titus to Dalmatia, and we can assume that Salona was the city where Titus began to spread the gospel. A Christian community existed here certainly in the middle of the 3rd century, if not much earlier, as well as the Jewish religious community. This is confirmed by an inscription that mentions Romans, Jews, and Christians. Many Christians were executed during Diocletian's persecutions in the year 304. The most known of all was the Bishop Domnio, who was probably originally from Syrian Antioch. Later on, Salona became the seat of the bishops and the most important center of Christianity in the province, with many basilicas erected over martyrs' graves, Manastirine, Kapljuč, Marusinac, and so on. Bishop Hesychius had correspondence with Saint Augustine and Pope Zosimus in the beginning of the 5th century. Church councils were held in Salona, in this very place, in 530 and 533. In the first decades of the 7th century, Salona was at its end. Due to the attacks of the Avars and Slavs, the city population found refuge on the islands and nearby Diocletian's palace. In addition to the numerous rich archaeological findings about life in the city in the early Christian times, there are almost 1,000 complete and damaged stone inscriptions, of which about 100 were written in Greek. This amount of inscriptions is unique because other sites on the eastern Adriatic coast and inland Dalmatia have only a dozen inscriptions from this period, and they cannot in any sense be compared to Salona. Most of foreigners in Salona are from eastern provinces, especially from Syria, more often from its northern part. Their origin is usually indicated by more or less detailed geographical data, since some of them list only the name of the province, and some of them even give the name of their city or village. Some inscriptions are fragmented, despite which incomplete traces of origin can be identified. It is the case with the place of Magara, which is probably northern Syria. If the name of the place is not specified or not preserved, the origin can still be assumed to some extent by the characteristics of their names. There is no doubt that Barnabas mentioned on sarcophagus from the 6th century, you can see these pictures of these monuments behind my back, and probably Matthias from the 4th century were of Semitic origin. We should also mention Martana, who was buried with her husband Stephanos, who was the priest in the 6th century. Also, there were the 2 sarcophagi from Manastirine. One belonged to Monimus and his wife Acme, who were buried there in the 4th century. The other sarcophagus was given by one person to Aurelius Maras and his wife. Names Monimus, Acme, and Maras indicate that they are of Middle Eastern origin. Unlike the other Orientals in the Salona, they didn't choose inscriptions in Greek, but had them engraved in Latin. From Mesopotamia, in Nisibis, comes one person whose portrait stele, you can see it over here, was erected by his brother Jacobus during the 4th century. From the same period is a fragment of the inscription of Aurelius Castorius from the village in Doleche in Asia Minor, who died at the age of 25. 6 Syrians were from villages in Apamea. Their epitaphs are also in Greek. Aurelius Matasis was buried in Manastirine, and between the mid-4th and mid-5th centuries, a priest and his mother, Domna, were buried there. The other Syrians have been buried in Salona, but we do not know the exact location. We do not know the exact place of their origin. These are the 20-year-old Isaacus, Malchus, who was son of Abram, brothers Georgius and Mara, and so on. There is also an Aurelius Palladius, who was the son of Beliabs. He was a man born in Damascus, the Damascene man, and he came from Lebanese Phoenicia. After living for 45 years in the faith of Christ, he was buried in Manastirine, as he said in his inscription, in peace in the year 400. From the province of Arabia during the 4th century come 2 natives of Fina. They were pretty young. One was only 17 years old when he died. The probable restitution of the ethnic Syros normally refers to northern Syria, Apamea or Antioch. People from other parts of the empire are much less represented in the population of late antique Salona. From Lydia in Asia Minor was one girl. She said she was a virgin. She was a Meneke. She was buried during the 4th century. One merchant from Anatolia, and so on. More delicate is the question of the presence of foreigners in laden epitaphs, on which the place of origin is rarely mentioned. One is from Africa. From Dunonia in Britain is one unknown, Clarissima Femina, the woman of a high social status. She left behind 2 children and was buried in 425 in a sarcophagus in Split in the church of Saint Euphemia in the vicinity of Diocletian's palace. One is a foreigner from Hispania. One is from Pannonia Savia. Her name is Kyriaka. You can see her sepulchral inscription behind my back. She was buried in Kapluch, and her grave is marked by a floor mosaic. Other persons are from Sirmium, a major city in Pannonia. One girl, Dominica, who was brought from Sirmium to Salona during the 5th century. One soldier, Flavius Fidenzius, and the abbot Johanna, whose sarcophagus was dated to year 612 or little later. That every preserved letter on an inscription is valuable and can lead to a different interpretation of the inscription, what can lead to creating the conflicting opinions in the literature, is also shown by the before-mentioned inscription of a woman whose name begins with letter No, N-O. This is the inscription that I'm talking about. It was mentioned earlier, and in the majority of the literature, scientists believe that she was from the city of Piterma in Galatia, in the Central Asia Minor. But that's pretty dubious, because the inscription says, "Here lies the Samaritan woman Nomia from the village of Pito, daughter of Euglosius. She passed away in God's peace 15 days before the calends of September," which means the year 539, having lived well for 27 years. It is generally accepted, including Inscriptiones Judaicae Orientis from 2004, that Nomia was Samaritan. However, the mention of ethnicity in front of the name is not common. Samaritans claim to be related by blood to those Jews of Samaria who were not deported by Assyrian conquerors of Israel in the year 722. Their sole norm of religious observance are the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They had their own temple in the Shechem at the base of Mount Gerizim. Jews had low esteem for the Samaritans. Today, their population reached 800. Their high priest resides in Nablus. They had a synagogue in Holland. This epitaph of Samaritan woman Nomia was found in the vicinity of cemeterial Basilica Manastirine. It is not clear whether she was a Christian, and there is nothing in the text which is inconsistent with her being a Samaritan by religion. Anyway, that she is a Samaritan may indicate her geographical provenance as well. Samaritans are confirmed on inscriptions from Thessaloniki, Delos, Piraeus, and Athens. Nomia's native village is unknown, and she might have fled Samaria during the revolts over there in the year 484 or 529. Her father's name is Euglosius, which means the bearer of the good rhetorical skills. This name is also unattested in Samaritan or Jewish, even Jewish context. This inscription took my attention when Mr. Jacob Barcarosa from Indonesia contacted me because he wanted to see can he get a better photo of Nomia's epitaph. After we exchanged several mails, I realized that Samaritans believe that this Nomia from Salona is ancestor of Samaritans now living all over the world. In his article, Barcarosa wrote, I quote, "This Nomia plays such a special role within our narrative, seemed destined to remain an obscure, remote phantom figure of bygone era. Whether Nomia was a Samaritan woman, a Jewess, or even a female figment of folk imagination didn't seem to matter much. My assumption was that our best hope of finding any information about Nomia or her family lay in Jewish records." End of quote. So Barcarosa describes how he saw Nomia's epitaph in Inscriptiones Judaicae and continues, quote, "It left me truly flabbergasted. I sat frozen for a moment, with my eyes wide and my heart fluttering, as I read intently the Greek text and English translation of what I soon realized was my ancestress' epitaph." End of quote. He ended with the explanation how Nomia's 2 sons and husband lived on. Her heirs continued to live in diaspora. So over here we have one inscription over which are, how can I say that, in contact, the old Samaritan legend and the epigraphical source of first line that we have over here in Salona. So to conclude, in total, there are 37 people who can be assigned a specific region of the Greek-speaking world as their origin. Furthermore, all of the Greek inscriptions from Salona are a priori attributable to nationals of the eastern provinces, even if the absence of geographical indication and the banality of their names prevent us from being more precise. On the other side, the great majority of the Leiden inscriptions are referring to natives of Salona, and just a small proportion of them belong to the foreigners from the other parts of the Roman world. For most of these foreigners, their social status remains unknown. Either their inscriptions are damaged and this information is missing, if it was recorded at all, or they didn't care to highlight it at all. Nevertheless, we see that among these foreigners, there were 2 priests, an abbess, several merchants, a soldier, and 1 clarissima femina. Judging by the characteristics of the epigraphic sources, we could conclude that every 9th or 10th inhabitant of late antique Salona was a foreigner. Most of them were of Oriental origin. The majority of others were from the provinces of the Middle Danube that were then under strong barbarian military pressure. Salona was obviously a safe haven for them. The Salonitan Christian community accepted them continuously from the 4th until the 7th century. They integrated into it and continued to live their faith. If you compare these inscriptions, even these in Greek, with the later ones, you can see that these Orientals use the exact specific epigraphic forms that the Salonitans, so the people from Salona, were also using. Many found their final resting places in the cemetery basilicas built over the graves of Salonitan martyrs and saints. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.